I've heard it said that your first role-playing game is likely to be your favorite. But what if that RPG is Quest 64? The name Quest 64, Holy Magic Century, or Eltale Monsters is not lost on loyal Nintendo fans of the late 1990s. Its reputation precedes itself, and not in a good way. I admittedly don't have much of a focus for this video other than sharing various thoughts I've amassed over the years about one of my childhood classics, a game people apparently hated then and now. I'm unsure if I'll ever have the patience for a dedicated analysis video, but I would like to explain and address Quest 64's critical reception. Coming off the Super Nintendo's plethora of quality RPGs, the game's perceived mediocrity disappointed many Nintendo 64 owners starving for a taste of the genre on their console. Meanwhile, Sony's PlayStation was enjoying the immense success and popularity of titles like Final Fantasy, which pushed groundbreaking new graphics and storytelling techniques through fancy cinematics and other advantages of disc-based hardware. Quest 64 seemed comparatively plain and boring, with a generic plot, simple albeit colorful visuals, bare-bones gameplay, and lackluster balancing. Accusations I can't really refute. Anyone familiar with the traditional JRPG formula knows what to expect here. The quest follows the magician Brian searching for his missing father, as he collects four, say it with me, treasures of the elements: fire, earth, wind, and water, which serve as the basis for Brian's magic abilities. Love them or hate them, the game has all the usual trappings: turn-based combat, random encounters, level-up systems with a dose of grinding, towns, dungeons, and so on. At the same time, however, it breaks conventions in detrimental ways. There is no form of currency or equipment, lessening the resource management and sense of reward when goods and services are given freely. Leveling up doesn't universally upgrade all stats. Instead, experience is gained independently for each by acting in a corresponding way. For example, Brian must take damage to increase defense, whack enemies with his staff to increase attack, cast magic to increase their power, and literally run around to increase agility. Focusing on certain stats can leave Brian deficient at others, resulting in an uneven character that requires more grinding to balance out. This gets worse when earning new magic within the four elemental categories, once one realizes that only a few spells are worth working towards, specifically in the water and earth elements. Heal is a necessity to survive dungeons without running out of items. Magic Barrier grants invincibility since the vast majority of monsters only use magic attacks, and Avalanche can be so devastating that there's little need for other offensive options. I pity anyone who unknowingly invested in the wind or fire elements, because with these three spells unlocked, the rest of the game is a total cakewalk, employing the same strategy for every battle. This whole system is fine in theory, but the consequences for neglecting key stats are too harsh. These are just a handful of complaints rightfully levied against Quest 64. So why do I respect it despite these faults? Well, being my first experience with this type of game, I had no preconceptions about what it should be and was too young to share people's expectations. As mentioned before on this channel, my introduction to video games began in 3D with the 5th generation of consoles, and I've since become interested in what this third dimension offers games everywhere. While contemporaries like Final Fantasy VII merely use 3D technology to embellish their presentation, Quest 64 attempts to utilize it in meaningful ways, particularly by incorporating 3D space into traditional turn-based combat. Battles take place on the land itself within a confined area, and while terrain plays a minimal role, factors like positioning and attack range must be considered. In addition to an agility stat, players have a brief window to evade enemy fire by physically moving out of the way. Other immersive effects include a controllable camera for surveying the landscape, bringing a sense of scope and adventure. While Final Fantasy VII was a hodgepodge of pre-rendered backgrounds with Lego-like character models, detailed battle screens, and full-motion video, everything in Quest 64 uses the same graphics with no jarring transitions, contributing to a more naturalistic feel, and I appreciate that consistency. Almost nothing is just for show. Anything seen can be explored, and nearly every single building and room can be entered, even if empty. Rather than choosing battle options from a list, players attack monsters directly by actually moving up close close to them. Escaping is similarly achieved by exiting the battle zone instead of relying on chance. Magic is organized by element and assigned to the 4 C buttons, making it easier, quicker, and more interesting to select spells. In retrospect, as an experiment to translate classic JRPG gameplay into 3D, I consider Quest 64 surprisingly novel and inspired, trying ideas that perhaps went unappreciated, but it also fumbles in basic ways. Looking into the development and promotional material shows a much more ambitious project, with multiple party members, day and night schedules for NPCs, horseback riding, and increased camera functions among other features. There was clearly a vision for something greater, and it's a shame the final product failed to deliver. I don't blame people for being let down. Real-world influences can and do impact our feelings on the entertainment we consume, and based on my research, Quest 64 did seem overhyped. When my family picked this game out at a local thrift store, the owner described it as hard to figure out but fun once you get the hang of it. While most likely a throwaway recommendation to get it off their shelf, this was pretty accurate for 7-year-old me who had never touched a role-playing game. The first robber might as well have been the final boss as a kid. I kept getting lost in the woods preceding the fight, and once I reached him, I could not figure out that I was too underleveled to win. I suppose it's just the nature of childhood to make fond memories out of humble experiences, but I remember gazing out to sea at Melrose Beach thinking that one day Brian's father would sail back to shore. I remember the wonder I felt lowering the water level in Larapool, teleporting to the Isle of Skye with its haunting music, the relief of coming out the other end of an arduous cave, the intimidation of seeing King Begis's castle and storming my way to the top through his hordes of knights, and finally the adventure culminating in a cosmic battle against Mammon, whom I later learned could be interpreted as demon god or the evil of wealth, which I thought was cool. To many, the legacy of Quest 64 is one of disappointment, but to me it was a gateway into a strange new world of video games. I'm sure if I had grown up around the golden age of JRPGs, I'd probably harbor the same dissatisfaction, but I didn't. I grew up with this. I love it, and not because it's an RPG. In fact, it may have gotten me off on the wrong foot as far as the genre is concerned. I didn't learn the value of long-form storytelling, compelling characterization, or mind-blowing graphics, and was introduced to tropes I would come to loathe, like grinding, repetitive combat, and random encounters. But I was impressed by the expansive scale, immersive gameplay, fully explorable world, the joy of watching my character grow, and the freedom to build him how I wanted, even if unbalanced combat narrowed my playstyle. Years later, when playing my next major RPG, Golden Sun, my first reaction was, oh, this is like Quest 64, except battles are static. That's kind of lame. I'd sure like to move around the battlefield. It's always interesting talking about unpopular games removed from their initial release, especially coming from a different perspective. It prompts questions on whether or not they deserve the hate. Were players right all along, or was there a misunderstanding? The answer is probably in the middle. Most times I don't think it matters where we land on the spectrum of positive to negative opinion, as long as we defend our positions fairly and reasonably. The quality of something has little bearing on one's ability to enjoy it, though I think reconciling our feelings with the truth is a sign of maturity. I have a big soft spot for this little stinker. It's sad to see good ideas brought down by poor execution, and in that sense I'm more so in love with what could have been. We can learn a lot from controversial games, and these are the ones that keep returning to my mind to ponder. I've spent countless hours imagining a potential remake that refines and improves Quest 64's concepts, and I hope to one day see such a successor attempted, if only in spirit. It goes to show that even the worst games possess value, whether intrinsic or extrinsic, to show us a better way.